I hope you enjoy this program about my favorite topic, tropical fish. Video cassettes of this program are available for $14.95 each by writing to Video Sig, 1030 East Duane Avenue, Suite C, Sunnyvale, California, 94086, or call 1-800-245-6717. In California, call 1-800-222-2996.
Look at the pretty blue ones.
Hey, Mom, the fish are babies!
Paul, what's this new fish?
Well, look at the extensive development of the barbels, the whiskers there. It's obviously a pimmaloed cat of some kind.
Mardell Laboratories and Aquarian Food are proud to present Help with the Home Aquarium from Paul Spiess, the Aquatic Maestro.
We're looking at a nice collection of medium-sized fish in this aquarium. Probably focus of all this collection is that school of tinfoil barbs that'll go shooting through the picture off and on. Nice contrast here as we look toward the bottom where you see plants and rocks and that. A comfort zone. A lot of the fish prefer that. Many of them react to that by changing their colors, richer, deeper. I had a friend, old Johnny, called me up one day. He had a South American cichlid, a portulagrensis that had outgrown his aquarium. It was 5 inches long or so. And he said, did I have room for it? And I said, sure, bring it over. Right? 20 aquariums, I can find room. So he brought it over and I popped it into a tank with other fish that size, 50-gallon one. And some 15 minutes later or so, he was over there looking to see how his fish was doing. And he couldn't find it. Hey, Paul, he said, my fish is gone. Well, I didn't think it was gone. I went over to find it for him, and it was sitting there right in front of him. Now, why couldn't he see it? Simple. I have black gravel. He has very light gravel. And against that black bottom, his portulagrensis had put on a dress that he had never seen in all the years that he raised that fish. Keeping fish is a learning process. Keeping any pet is a learning process. Tell you what I learned one time. I had a live pet shop show. And people used to bring their pets on, all different kinds of pets. And one day a little kid brought a chipmunk on, his pet chipmunk. So there we are on the air. This is live. This is 30 years ago. And no editing, you know, what happens, happens. And I said to him, what do you got in the box? He says, I got my pet chipmunk. I said, well, get him out. And he says, you kidding? He said, I just caught him yesterday. Well, there we are. We're waiting to see this ferocious wild animal. So I grabbed the little sucker and held him like that, and all people ever saw was his blushing head while I kept him from biting me further. Chipmunks, whatever. People keep a lot of different kind of pets. What we're keeping is fish. And we're looking through this aquarium, which is in a pediatrician's office in Tenafly, New Jersey. And of course, this serves a nice purpose in it. It charms the little kids who are in here waiting for their turn. They get a chance to watch all these fish in action. Fish, fish, fish. Name of the game. You know, we've talked over and over again on these shows about Tank Beautiful. Well, how about Tank Plentiful? We sure have a mix in here, and I want you to take a look at them while I'm talking. See if you can figure out what this mix is, because there are really two distinct types of fish. I know you're sitting on the edge of your seat. I'm not going to hold you any longer in this this tremendous agony that's enthralling you. Tetras and barb types. Broad category here now. That's what's in here. Why did I group them? For no other reason than this, again, is a collection of fish that form the Beginner's Community Aquarium. And these, as we look down through this aquarium mix, a veritable soup here. We've got some Odessa barbs in here. We've got some sharks, and they're related to the barbs, the minnow types, some rasboras, you know, a couple, 3 different types of
tetras in here, serpi, I remember popping in here. One big old catfish, you gotta have big old catfish, you know, that's part of the rules. And we got some long-fin danios, and that, of course, again, speaks to man's intervention in the controlled breeding of some of these fish. Wouldn't find these long-fin guys that are hanging at the top here in nature. They can't swim fast enough to survive, but they sure look nice in our aquarium. What's the important thing about this? It's this. Another one of old Paul's fish. Mix, compatibility. You got to put them together. Now, it's easy with this collection to say 3 of these, 3 of these, 3 of these, because it appears superficially that these fish are very much alike, when in actual practice, there is a huge difference between barbs and tetras. Doesn't mean we can't keep them together, but it does mean we feed them right and keep an eye on them. Some of them get sort of large, but here we've mixed them with some regard for the size. What's the difference? Well, first of all, the difference is in the mouth. If you look at a barb's mouth, you find no teeth. Now that tells you something about what you eat when you don't have any teeth. You can't gum a steak to death. The barbs are grubbers, they eat a lot of vegetation, that route. You look at the tetras, they have teeth. I don't care how small they have teeth. Some of them have formidable teeth. Look at that particular tetra called the piranha. That's got teeth. Sure it does. One of the popular tetras has the name exodon, called the bucktooth tetra, Paradoxus. Exodon means teeth on the outside. This guy has so many teeth, they literally look like they overflowed his mouth. They're out on the lips. I'm not sure how you chew with your lips, but now that's a look at the mouth. Now let's look at the intestine. If I have a tetra this long, he has an intestine that long, roughly speaking. But if I have a barb that long, his intestine is 4 times the length of the fish. Why? Takes a lot of time to digest cellulose. Okay? And cellulose is the basis of vegetation. If you're going to eat a lot of grass, algae, plant material and that, you got to keep it in you longer. Simple as that. So although these fish look alike superficially, and although we can mix them nicely in our community tank, in our tank plentiful, as I suggested, keep in mind that they are radically different fish, and their diet has to include some differences. That's why you feed the broad scam, the staple diet that has a mixture of everything. If we could afford to feed one of these fish alone, maybe we could specialize. But here in the community tank, we feed the community tank food. Now, where do we start? Well, pick one. We're here at White's Fish Farm, and that gives us the ability to go around and get some of these and some of these and some of these and pop them together. He's got water. It's all the same throughout, so there's no shock in moving these. And they even take to handling them pretty well, and we see, as a result, a preference of these fish immediately for the part of the water that they prefer. Notice almost a layering. Up at the top here, if I move too close, they move right away, but the danios are up near the top. Now, the danios come from the Asian continent for the most part, and they are a minnow type and closely related to the barbs. So are the rasboras, so are the sharks. White clouds are a cold water minnow that we keep in with our tropical fish, come from China. And are you ready for this? Here's another close relative of the barbs, the goldfish. So whatever we said about diet applies to all of these guys. But up at the top here, I have all of the danios, the long-fin danios, swimming pretty much together. I look down through the aquarium, I see in the middle a bunch of the serpi. Now those are the guys, the red ones with the black dorsal fin. And then down at the bottom, what am I looking at? Looks like the Odessa barbs, those long fin guys. There's another fish that has evolved with the help of man to make it that long fin variety. And the beauty of it comes in when you look at these because of the remarkable scale definition. Now, one other thing about these barbs is that, you tend to say barbs as though you can throw them all in one bag. Scientifically, they're split up into a number of groups, a number of different genera, and of course with each one with its associated species. But the division, a non-scientific division, would give us barbs with 1 pair of whiskers, 2 pair, or 3 pair. Barbs tend to be the Asian fish. Tetras we find in Africa and in South America. Barbs primarily in Asia, as I say, but also into Africa. So not necessarily a fish that finds itself together except in these conditions, but they do get along all right. Now, we've been talking about barbs and tetras, and perhaps if you look at the mix that's in here, you get the idea that these are small fish. Some of them are. Some of them mature at only about 1 inch, but some of them get quite large. For instance, this fella gets very large. This is the tinfoil barb, old Schwanenfeldei, and a popular fish, but it outgrows a lot of people's aquarium. Now back, I don't know, 10, 12 years ago, something like that, when we were doing the old Guppies, the grouper shows, we had in the back room a 135-gallon aquarium where we stored these stars when they were off the air. And in this aquarium, now here's a little problem coming for you. In this aquarium are 9 tinfoil barbs about that long. Nice school. Flash, flash, flash. In with them are 3 Oscars, about 1 foot long, all big fish. One night, somebody working back there threw a coil of wire up over the post that was the top of the stand, and unfortunately the air hoses were attached to that post, and when the wire descended, it blocked off the air, shut it off completely to this aquarium. All of 1 fish died, and none of the other. There you go. Which one died, Agatha? Well, all of the barbs died. Why? Because they really need a lot of oxygen. That's one of the first fish to suffer for need of oxygen. So we got some tremendous stress in the gill area. A friend of mine that runs a hatchery up here in this corner of Pennsylvania keeps a collection of fish. He's got about 600,000 fish, salmon, babies. They're about 3 and 4 inches long. One of the things that he worries about most is if you get a rainy season, rainy storm, a prolonged one, and the turbidity causes the water to be muddy. Now, you might not normally think of that as a stress, except muddy water is muddy because there are small particles rolling around in it, and again, in the gills, slowing down the efficiency, causing problems. So, if you're going to keep a lot of fish, then you better know about fish. Now let's go on a little bit. So there's some other fish that get pretty big. The black shark is one of the very popular sharks that we keep. Now, they're called sharks because of the high dorsal fin in that, but they're not really sharks. And again, I go back to the other adventure there when I was going to shoot a show about sharks, and I wanted to show a black shark for one reason or another. And it was in a very large aquarium, 220 gallons, and I thought, well, I know better than this, excuse me, but to be safe, I'm going to put 2 black sharks in this 220-gallon aquarium for as long as we're going to shoot. They won't find each other. You kidding me? They found each other just like that. One of them was about 10 inches, the other one about 8, and the big guy immediately started after the little guy. But for whatever this story of animal behavior is worth, here's what happened. Very quickly, the little black-tailed shark took up residence, the little black shark took up residence above and to one side of a big Oscar that was just sort of laying there like he was basking in the sun. And if the other shark came near him, he just sort of slipped over the Oscar onto the other side. Safe place to be, I guess. Sharks are a great part of the hobby. There's a couple different kinds in here. I got a school of tricolor sharks. Now that's really is a nice fish. Dynamite contrast because of the dark fins, and you can see why the tricolor. You can see that black in the fins, and as they mature, you get a nice yellowing in there, and of course a basic silver fish. There's one red-tailed shark in here. There's one in there because that's all you ever put in the aquarium in these guys, the red tails, the black sharks, the rainbow sharks. You either put one in, like I have here, or you put in 3 or 4. Because the plain fact of the matter is, in general, they don't like each other. And the big one is going to chase the little one. Don't get 2. Doesn't change anything if you get 4 of them. The big one will chase, but it sure splits up the attention the little guys get. You remember what I said about long-term stress from chasing? In the long term, it's very harmful to the fish, can kill them. Sharks, another relative of the barbs, and at least the black shark and some of the other labios get very large. What else are we talking about in this collection? Danios. I was looking here. Do I have any Danios in there? Well, the Danios are the group that contain the very common zebra. Okay, and that is, again, a fish that a lot of people start with, and when they say, gee, you know, I've had a lot of live bear babies, but I want to raise some egg layers. Well, they start out with the zebra Danio because there's a lot of ways to separate those aggressive chasing breeders from their eggs. Someday we'll talk about that, but the zebra Danio is representative of the group that we're looking at that is taking over the surface of this aquarium. If I didn't know better, I think these guys knew where the food was coming from, because look how many of them are up here at the top with me. I got to go to the red towel here. As soon as you get wet, you get dry. Spend all your life doing that. So, Danios, about a half a dozen different popular varieties, leopards, zebras, spotted ones. The giant Danio, which gets about 3 inches. Not a giant by any means, but the biggest of the Danios. And the neat thing about this fish, it's a great mixer. If you've got an aquarium that you look at it and you say, boy, that's beautiful, but it's so quiet, so sedate, so laid back, go out and spring for a half a dozen zebras or some giant Danios, put them in there. They're like young boys in a playground in spring. Really can't slow them down. And I should say something about the white cloud as a member of this collection. Excuse me. The white cloud is a minnow, but minnows are closely related to all of these fish that we're just discussing in greater detail here. Minnows are the white cloud, very popular fish. And once again, we're seeing some long fin varieties that man has brought about through his controlled breeding. At the typical Florida fish farmer's layout, you see what you see behind me here. You see open ponds, and these I would guess are maybe 50, 60 feet wide and twice that in length. And the noise you hear is a compressor. There's aeration in every one of these ponds, despite the fact they're in the open, because they're very conscious of stress. Because this is where it all starts. The fry are introduced. While we were back at the buildings, I just saw them loading a bag, an enormous bag full of the albino Aeneas corridorus, the little white corridorus. They were all about 1/8 of an inch long. He must have had thousands of them. They're coming out this way. And now the fry that were introduced into this pond about 4 months ago now have been sized and have grown up to the point where they're saleable. And here's the gang working here now early in the morning taking these out. Actually, what they're catching here are high-fin rosy barbs. You can see them dragging from one end of the pond to the other, floats on top of this net, waits on the bottom. So they are really working the bottom. And from what Tim Hennessy was telling me, depending on the fish, they may catch them all or almost all of them in one pass here. Then again, he said some of them hide in your footprints. I like that expression. So we'll see what happens when they bring this up at the end. But we're working here with high-fin rosy barbs, and this is one of many, many ponds on this, some couple hundred on this 50-acre farm. And this is their small farm here. You can see aeration in front of the one fellow there, violent aeration, because with the turbidity in these ponds, there's a limited amount of dissolved oxygen that the water can hold. And of course, the warmer it gets,
the more stress on the fish. So they always do this in the morning, this operation you're seeing right here. And now the net comes up to the very end here. And they're ready now with huge styros up on this trailer above us that you're going to see. These styros are painted black. Now you see, look at the fish. High fin rosy barbs on their way to the market. And these styros up in the wagon that they'll be loading these into are actually painted dark on the inside to cut down the photic shock. Fun little debris there, throw that out. They talk about predation in these ponds, and we saw a couple of big turtles on our way out here. And he says they also have problems with birds and snakes and otters. Believe it or not, otters is another problem. What we're looking at here, but I gotta guess we're 3/4. Now these have been filled with water from one of the other ponds and is super oxygenated where they're putting them into the truck. They really are conscientious here in terms of stressing the fish, because these fish are going to be handled now a couple of times on their way to you, and the better the trip starts, the better results they get when we get them home. Now again, with the tetras, not all of them are small. Some of them get quite large. Some of the piranhas get, foot long. Some of the giant cousins of the piranhas, the black, the colosoma, the pacu as it's called, you see them in municipal aquariums. They're 3 feet long and that thick, that high. Had one of those caught in Lake Erie last summer. Got a phone call from the newspaper, piranha found in Erie. You can see where the story was leading. And I went down to see what it was, and it was one of these black piranhas. And I tried to tell the guy, okay, it's not going to make it through the winter and on and on. But boy, those guys are determined to make a story. Obviously, a hobbyist had released it when it outgrew his aquarium. So some of these tetra types get quite large. Some are quite ferocious. Found in South America and Africa, they are true predators because they really are piscivores, if you will, for the most part, but they'll eat almost anything that comes into the water. Now, not all of them are that big, that ferocious. Fortunately, there are literally thousands of small tetras that make up the real heart of the hobby. And almost any aquarium that you look at that has a mix of small community-type fish will have 8 or 10 different kinds of tetras. Now, maybe people haven't recognized that that's what they've collected, but they like the shape, they like the size, and they're very hardy, and a lot of rich colors in them. So a neat fish for the small mixed aquarium tank. But again, a fish that requires good water quality, good diet, requires nothing more than some common sense and some good preventative maintenance on your part. So you take care of these fish, and barb or tetra, they're going to last an awful long time. Fortunately, there is a niche in the hobby where these beautiful small tetras or barbs find a nice place. This is all glasses designer aquarium. Something new, a new concept. Completely self-contained, a neat approach, and it explores a niche in this hobby that we haven't looked at before, the desktop or the top of the child's dresser. It also causes us to focus on the water quality, the impact of too many fish or too big a fish on this small volume. Oh, it doesn't say you can't be successful with any kind of an aquarium in this 4 gallons. It just says, watch your P's and Q's or you're going to be courting trouble. But the results can be delightful if you do it right. Here's 3 or 4 small tetras, a little catfish. Not overload the system. And where? In the office. Where are you sitting? Right where the guy sits that works in this office. So he turns and takes a look at this, and it's truly therapeutic viewing. It really is healthy, and it's beautiful. What a great way to relax. A parting thought for you as we wind up this little discussion about tetras, and that's this. Not all tetras show the remarkable finnage and color
that comes to them with maturity. Some of you have seen some of that in the more common tetras, the bleeding heart, for instance. Probably the most dramatic evidence of it I see in my African tank, I call it. Now, it has no cichlids in it, but I have got a half a dozen different kinds of African tetras. And the Phenacogrammus, the Congo tetra, is the most beautiful fish there is when it matures, when it reaches sexual maturity. Long flowing dorsal fin. The males in particular get that 3-part spike on their tail. Really a fantastic fish. But when you see it in the pet shop at 1 inch long, it's another little silver nothing that you would never pick up. Moral to the story, I guess you got to poke your nose in the book a little bit. Or you got to have that old dependable guy at the pet shop who you say, what is this thing? He says, oh, you want to see? And he shows you your first adventure in the book. You find out tetras can indeed be beautiful. Some are the true gems of the aquarium hobby.